We welcome you ladies here tonight on this beautiful fall evening. It's a blessing to be in the house of the Lord, blessing to be with Christian people tonight. And Bonnie has a song here that she picked for us to sing tonight. It's in your songbook holders there. I Need the Prayers of Those I Love. It's just such a wonderful song. It's such a blessing to have Christian friends that hold us up in prayer when we need it, to be there to encourage us. And so, yeah, as we sing this, just to think of the huge blessing we have to be a part of the family of God, people that care for us. I need the prayers of those I love, while traveling o'er life's rugged way, that I may true and faithful be, and live for Jesus every day. I want my friends to pray for me, to bear my tempted soul of love, and intercede with God for me. I need the prayers of those I love. I need the prayers of those I love to help me in each trying hour, to bear my tempted soul to Him, that He may keep me by His power. I want my friends to pray for me, to bear my tempted soul of love, and intercede with God for me. I need the prayers of those I love. I want my friends to pray for me, to hold me up on wings of faith, that I may walk the narrow way, kept by our Father's glorious grace. I want my friends to pray for me, to bear my tempted soul of love, and intercede with God for me. I need the prayers of those I love.
I too would like to welcome each of you this evening. This ladies' meeting always just blesses my heart so much to see all of you ladies together in one place, and we all just love the Lord. It's just always such a blessing to me. I'm so privileged to be able to introduce Bonnie to you this evening. I have gotten to know her better in the last 2 years, and she is a very special person to me. She's an inspiration to me, and I just love her, and I'm looking so forward to hearing her story tonight. As a little bit of an introduction for her, the first 6 years of her family, she lived with her mom and dad. And after that, she was taken care of by her grandmother for a year, the next 5 years in foster care, the next 5 years by a stepmother, and then 5 years again with another foster family. Or maybe it was the same one, I'm not sure, the same one. And then she was on her own at 21. So she has a big story. We all have big stories, but we're looking forward to hearing from Bonnie tonight. If you want to come forward, I'll have prayer with you. Let's pray. Father, I just thank you so much for today. God, thank you for Bonnie. Thank you for bringing her into our midst. God, thank you for her story. And I just pray that as she shares her story with us, Father, that you would just wash her in peace right now. Lord, I pray that you would just give her the words to speak. Lord, I know that she wants to be a vessel of you, that your words can flow through her. And God, that we may be blessed and that we may be inspired. We just lift her to you in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you.
Choices. God gave us the freedom of choice. Aren't you glad? I am. There's a lot of choices that I've made in my life that put me where I am now. Okay. Have you ever had the itch? You know, the 7-year itch? Well, I was in a school in Georgia, and my dad was teaching in the same school. Anyway, one day I got to school, and the students were lining the hall, and the middle of the hall was empty. And I thought, what in the world is going on? So I asked my friend Sybil, who was walking with me, what is going on? Why are they acting like this? And she said, well, they think you have the itch. I said, the itch? What's that? And she said, you know, the 7-year itch. And then up ahead, I saw my brother, and he decided to really play it up. So he would kind of squat, and then he'd start scratching all over. And that just made the students even worse. And then he'd make a dash at them, and they would go screaming. Well, I guess the parents found out and started pulling their children out of school because they were afraid of their children will get the itch. And then to top it off, our entire family, including my dad, got expelled. And we were told not to come back to school unless we have a note from our doctor saying that we are free of the itch. We thought this was just hilariously fun. So Dad took us all to the doctor, and the doctor just laughed. And he looked at our hands, and all he saw was chapped hands, because we had outside chores, and our hands were chapped, and we didn't have lotion, and so he just told Dad to go buy some lotion and use it twice a day. And he gave us a note saying that we were free of the itch. Well, it was even announced on the radio that the Maxwells don't have the itch and that it's safe to send your children back to school. Well, we were disappointed because we were hoping to have a few days at home just for fun. We didn't get it. So, on a more serious note, for by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus unto good works, which God hath before ordained that we should walk in them. That's Ephesians 2:8-10. And he shall give his angels charge over thee to keep thee in all thy ways. I'm not sure how old I was. Susanna was a baby, and she is 34, I think. Anyway, I found myself in an area of North Chicago where the sounds were a bit frightening. There were screams, popping sounds, crashes, more screams. Anyway, it was kind of scary, but it became necessary for me to walk several city blocks to do some laundry. And as I walked alone down the street, I noticed a group of young men just lounging around. And as I got closer, I began to notice what they had in their hands. They were weapons. They had broken bottles, bricks, one even had a chain. Anyway, when I got closer and they began to notice me, I somehow knew that I would not escape if I tried to flee. So the only thing I could do is pray. And I asked the Lord to protect me and take my fear away. And suddenly I had no fear. So I held my head up high and I marched straight toward them. When I got close, they opened it up and I walked down the middle of them. And I didn't look at them directly, but I noticed that they weren't looking at me. They were looking beside me. I wonder what they were seeing. Was it angels? Something I'll never know. Set your eyes on Jesus and don't lose sight of him. When you do that, you will not see the dangers around you. You will only see Jesus, and he'll protect us from those dangers. Okay, my story begins not when I was born, but many, many years back, way back in the early 13th century, back in Scotland. I had to go back to these stories to understand myself, understand why I am the way I am. Anyway, I come from a people who are fighters, who are not afraid to fight for what they believe, and they had a purpose, and they were willing to fight. So when we know what we believe, and we need to fight, we can, spiritually. Anyway, my ancestors come from England, Scotland, Ireland, Sweden, and probably some more countries. But anyway, there's a lot of Maxwell family history back in Scotland, including the Caverlavrock Castle, built in the early 13th century. So I found that interesting, that there was actually a castle. Let's see. As Julie said, I only had 6 years with my mother. After that, my parents divorced, and then my grandma took care of us for a year. And during that time that Grandma was taking care of us, Dad moved us to Mississippi. And there we saw some strange-looking people. They called themselves Mennonites. We thought they looked so strange because we had never seen people dressed like that before. Anyway, the need arose that we needed to go into foster care. Children's Services caught wind that this family was poor. We hardly had anything to eat. And what little we did eat, we didn't use it right. My siblings were throwing the only potatoes we had over the house. They were missiles. But anyway, we lived in a little town called Brooksville, and right beside a railroad track. Every day, a train would come past at the same time, at 12 o'clock noon. And we made a habit of, we would run out and wave to the engineer, and he would wave back. In fact, he would really wave. He would lean out of the engine and take his hat off and wave his hat. And we thought that was so cool. Anyway, one day he didn't wave. Instead, he threw out a brown package. We thought, what in the world? We picked it up and we opened it, and here it was candy. And so the next day, we decided we're going to go out and jump up and down and wave and tell them thank you for the candy. So we were doing this, and out comes another package, a different kind of candy. Anyway, from then on, as long as we lived in that house, the engineer would throw out a bag of candy. And being excited about it, of course, we told our friends, or I did. And they wanted to see this for themselves. They didn't believe that this would actually be happening. So they came and, well, the package landed at my little brother's feet. And he reached down to pick it up, and one of the boys grabbed it away from him and started tearing it open. Well, the engineer saw what was happening, and he stopped the train. He came back, and he told them that he threw this candy out for these children that live in this house. And please, don't let me see you here again. So we had someone that was looking out for us. Soon after I was let me back up. Children's Services had their eye on us, and they were just ready to make us wards of the state. And my dad caught wind of it, so he went to his friend, Elmer Mast, and was pouring out to him what was happening because he didn't know what to do. Dad wanted to go to college and get a teaching degree so he could get a better job to take care of us. And he couldn't do that. Well, he had to let his mom go home because she got sick. So it looked impossible. So Elmer asked him if it would be all right if he would present it to the church and see if the families in church would take us in as foster. So they had a meeting, and they agreed to take us in on a temporary basis. The thing is, they said they would take us in on I lost my train of thought, sorry. One of those moments. Anyway, each of the families chose one of us children. There were 6 of us children. And I was not happy with the family that chose me. I liked them, I knew them, but I didn't want to live with them. I don't know why. But I did know I wanted to live with the Grabers because they had 3 little girls that I liked to play with. So I cried, and I asked, don't the Grabers want me? And he says, well, I didn't ask them. I'll go ask them, and I'll come back tomorrow and tell you. So he did. The next morning he came back, and he said that they will take me, that they want me. I was so happy. So that's how I made a big choice that made a huge difference in our lives, in my life. I went to live with Benny Grabers, Benny and Sylvia. But let me tell you a story about them, how it came to be that they were even in Mississippi. They were living in Kokomo. And it was at Christmas time, and they were going to go to Florida to visit her sister for Christmas. But she also had an uncle in Mississippi, so they decided to stop in and visit him first and then go on to Florida. Well, Daddy was so fascinated with the farmland that he just couldn't get it out of his head. So on their way home from Florida, he says, let's go back to Mississippi. Well, this time he was farm hunting. And he found a farm and purchased it, went home, sold his business, sold his house. They packed up and moved to Mississippi to a dairy farm. Just a few months before I came on the scene. I believe that God had that all planned out so that he was providing me a foster home. And only God can do that. I just marvel at how God led them to be where he needed them to be to give me a home. Even though I had a silly reason for wanting to go there, still God honored that and let me live with the Grabers. And I felt like I chose well because I thought I had the best foster family of all of them. I was treated very well. I was treated as part of the family. And Mom already had 3 little girls to sew dresses for. She had 2 boys that were younger. And then they took me in. And Mom was only 28. She already had 5 children, and then she took someone in that was a year older than her oldest. But that never bothered me, that even though I was older than Lois, she was the leader. And that never bothered me one bit, because I was second born in my family, so I took the second born position in their family. It worked out perfectly. Soon after I was there, Mom took me to the doctor to make sure I was healthy. Well, my TB test was positive. And I think that really scared Mom, because when she realized my TB test was positive, she packed my bags before we went to see the doctor. And then on the way, she talked to me about preparing myself to live in an institution. First time in my life, I was scared. But we went to the doctor. He did a chest x-ray, and I was clear. There is a lot of TB in my family, and they thought maybe I was just exposed to TB, and that's why I was testing positive. My entire family tests positive to this day. Well, my children don't, though. I think they were negative, but all of my siblings test positive. So I was told, don't ever take a TB test, because it could be, they're putting those germs in you, and it could make it become active again. So anyway, after we were with the Mennonites in our foster homes for 5 years, Dad had remarried, he had gone to college, he got a job, and moved to Georgia. So he came back to get us to get his family all together. Well, we didn't really want to go because we were adjusted to our foster families. We loved them, and we really wanted to stay. But Dad wanted us too. So who has the right to his children? Anyway, he said, okay, I'll see you in court. So there was a court summons, and we had to go to court. Well, you probably know whatever that word is. The outcome of that, we were told we had to go back and live with Dad. Well, Dad had remarried. He married Lavina Schrock. She had her background was Amish. She married him knowing he was divorced and knowing that divorce is wrong. As long as her mother was living, she wouldn't consider it, but after her mother died, I don't know what happened, except that she told me she was out feeding the chickens one morning, and all of a sudden, she saw nothing wrong with marrying my dad. So she married him, and, well, first they married in secret, and after about a week, they got caught. So she admitted that, yes, they did get married. So they said, well, then you have to go and live with him. He was living in the back of a truck. So I guess she had to go and live with him in the truck for a while until they found a place to live. Anyway, they had a son. And so when we went back to live with Dad and my stepmother, Lavina, they already had one son, and she was expecting her second child. Well, later on, Lavina admitted to me that she didn't want us children. She only said that in court because she knew that Dad wanted us. And she said, I don't love you, and I see no reason to pretend. So she didn't. So I got along with her because I can pretty well get along with anybody. Anyway, that's the way it is with some people. My sister is the opposite. She did not get along with her. And she eventually ran away from home. Well, she went to a friend's house, and Dad had an idea where she might be, so he went to that house asking where she was, and she was up in a tree looking down at him. Anyway, I think she made a noise or something, and he told her to come down and go home with him. And then she ran again. And I don't know how Dad found her, but he found her again and brought her home. The third time she left, I don't know if Dad just didn't go get her, but she didn't come home again. I eventually ran away from home when I was 16. I went to Florida to be with my mom. And by then, she was also remarried. So I had a stepfather. I never did really get to know him well. He was kind. He was nice. But we had no relationship or anything. So anyway, I wasn't there very long. I think I was there like 2 months. And one day, my dad shows up. And he wants to take me home. Well, my brother was with me, so he caught us both and took us back to Alabama. We were in Florida, and Dad took us back to Alabama. And on the way, he told me, if you just have to leave, tell me, and I'll even pack your lunch. And I thought, yeah, right, you'll tie me up in my bedroom. Well, 3 weeks later, my brother disappeared. I was blamed. They thought surely I had known about it. I didn't. I was mad at him for leaving without me because we had agreed that if he leaves, I leave with him. Well, he decided not to wait on me, and so he up and left. I think that time he went to Mississippi, back to Elmer's, and that didn't go well because Scott's influence wasn't good. for their children. So that did not work out. And then one day, Scott shows up at my dad's house with a whole bunch of stuff. He had a whole stereo set. And anyway, I didn't know how in the world could he travel with all that stuff. But by then, I was ready to go. The reason I felt like I had to get away was because of my stepmother's treatment, mostly of my brothers. She would send, all of us out to pick blackberries along in the woods, fence rows, wherever. And we were told not to come back to the house until our buckets were full, all the way up. Well, I could get my bucket full, but my little brothers had a rougher time because they were little. And they were hungry, so they would eat berries. By the time they got back to the house, their buckets were not full. And she would send them right back out without a meal and tell them, fill that bucket. So they had to go back out and pick another bucket full. Well, they had to go without so many meals that I would sneak food to them. And other times when I didn't do that, they would get into the pantry where she stored the canned goods, and they would open a jar of peaches and eat the whole thing. That was one thing. And another thing, Lavina would, she had been part of the Amish Jewish cult. Have you heard of those books? Growing Up in the Amish Jewish Cult. It was written by Patricia Hostetler. Well, Patricia is a first cousin to my stepmother. And my stepmother was in that cult. And she treated us the way the children were treated in the cult. When there were visitors, we were not allowed to stop and visit with them. We had to keep on with our work, whatever she had given us to do. We were not allowed to stop. Then she would also spank my brothers. She always used a green twig, and she would snap off the little twigs off of it and leave little pieces on it, the knobs, and she would whip with that. One time my brother got whipped all the way from his feet to his neck. It broke his skin, so he was bleeding, he was bruised. He was in pain. And I was not allowed to do anything for him. There were times when I didn't ask, and I did put salve on my brothers, but if I got caught, I got in trouble. Anyway, we had a lot of fun, especially in Fairmount, where we had gone directly from the foster homes. One thing that happened was Dad and Lavina had gone out for the evening. In fact, they were going to be gone all night. So we did our chores and we all went to bed. We all slept upstairs in this big plantation house. Anyway, we were laying in bed and we heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Of course, we didn't lock our house. The doors, everything was open. And I was stiff with fear. And anyway, these footsteps came all the way up and stopped right outside our door, our bedroom door. And my sister told me, stay really still. So I did, and all of a sudden she jumped out of bed, threw open the door, and those footsteps went down the stairs, down the hall, down the steps outside. We heard them going. And my sister was chasing those footsteps, but she never saw anything. But I heard the footsteps going down the road, but she never saw anything. So we don't know what that was. Sometimes we like to say it was a hint. Yeah, we had horses, and this one big horse, his name was Dawson. He was so tall that I could bend at my waist and walk under his belly. And that was the horse that he was strong, he was big. If we didn't have enough horses to go around, then 2 or 3 people could ride on him, and he was just fine. And there were times that my sister, and then if she had a friend over, and we all needed a horse, so we all got on him. Well, I was always on the back. One time we went through a creek, and it had a steep bank on the opposite side. And as the horse started going up that bank, I started sliding. And I slid off the back of him, and I grabbed his tail. And he pulled me up to the top. But then I had to have a stump or something to stand on to get back on him. He's also the horse that I tried to saddle before I really knew how. My brother had taught me how to ride, and he showed me how to put a saddle on him. And I decided one time that I'm going to go and I'm going to do it myself. I would like to ride him. So I went to the barn and I saddled him, and I was pretty proud of myself that I could do it. And so I got on him, and he shot out of the barn. I had no control over him. He ran up the road, got to our drive, and our drive was kind of a circle around the house. And as we were coming up the drive, there were some big rocks beside the drive. Well, it would have been on this side. Anyway, as we got closer to those big rocks, the saddle was slipping further and further and further, and I knew soon I was going to be under him. So I let go, and I fell on those rocks. Would you know, on the other side of the drive stood four brothers, laughing hilariously. So when I got up, I determined in my mind, they will never know that I'm hurt. I couldn't hardly breathe. I couldn't hardly move, but I was determined they are not going to find out. And they didn't. Later on, when I was in my 30s, I was to a doctor, it's homeopathic doctor. Anyway, he said, you had some broken ribs, and they're knit together a little crooked. And I thought, oh, I think I know when that happened. And my family never knew. Let's see, what else happened that you would want to know? We lived in Fairmount for 2 years, and then we moved to a place called Whitesburg, Georgia, and I was in the 8th grade by then. And while we lived there, several things happened there that some of them are hilarious. One time, we lived in this barn. It used to be a dairy barn that someone converted into a house. Well, there wasn't enough room for 10 people because there were 8 children by then and mom and dad. So he bought a trailer for more bedroom space. And there was a fence between the front and the backyard, and just a really narrow gate to get between the house and the fence. Anyway, we wanted to ride horse, and mom and dad were gone. Well, the only way to get that horse to the front was to go through the house. So we gently led the horse through the house. And Mom was mad when she found out. But it didn't hurt anything, I promise. Let me tell you about, you probably noticed all the knit dresses back there hanging. My dad's aunts, my great aunts, had a knitting shop in the Marshall Fields building in Chicago. They had it for 35 years. And Aunt Baki would draw, she would sketch out the garment, and then they taught people to knit, and then she would write out all the instructions for each piece, the sleeve, the front part, the back part, whatever. And she would send it out for people to knit. Well, my Aunt Ethel could knit really fast. And I found this out from a letter I just read the other day that I didn't catch it the first time I had read it, from my dad's cousin. She said, someone could walk into their living room, turn around and walk back out, come back the next morning, and there would be a skirt matching the top that they could just pick up and go. And I had brought some skirts along so you can see how she made it. I find it really fascinating, but my girls wouldn't let me leave it here. They thought I had too much stuff. Sometimes we have to listen to our children, right? When I ran away from home when I was 16, I went by bus. My dad had been giving me $3 a week for allowance. So I saved my money until I had enough for a bus ticket. And then the last day of school, it took some more planning than that. At night, I would get some clothes together and go out in a field where there was an old truck, and I hid a suitcase there, and I would put them in the suitcase. And then when my suitcase was full, I told my boyfriend where it was, and he went and got it, and so his mom had it. And the last day of school, instead of going into the school when I got off the bus, I went back to her car and got in. First time I ever met her. Anyway, so she took me to the bus station. And I went to Florida. Some things happened on the way that weren't too good. There were 2 guys on there that tried to talk this young, blonde, 16-year-old into going with them instead of going to see my mom. Well, it took a lot of determination on my part to say, no, I am going to see my mom because I haven't seen her in a long time and I want to be with my mom. And they said, oh, come on, we'll give you a good time. We're going to go to Florida. And I would say, no. And anyway, finally, when I did get to my stop, I got out, and this guy got off with me. And I thought, oh boy, what is he going to do? And he told me that he was just making sure that this is where I really wanted to go. He almost missed the bus. He had to run to get back on because my mom showed up. She knew I was coming, so their car pulled in. Then that's when he ran. So I was really thankful for that. God protected me and kept me on the right track. While there, I got a babysitting job. And Mom approved. The man came to pick me up because his wife had gotten a job, and so they wanted someone to babysit in the evening while she was working at the tavern. Well, what they didn't tell us was there were 2 men and another woman who were right there that could have taken care of that baby. But no, they had to hire a girl to come and take care of the baby so they could sit in the kitchen drinking and playing cards. And anyway, the baby was hungry and I couldn't find any milk to put in his bottle. So I asked, do you have anything I can put to feed the baby? They said, here, give him some beer. Just put beer in the bottle. I said, I will not. I want some money so I can go buy some milk. So he grudgingly dug out some money and gave them to me. And so I took the baby with me and we walked to a store. I got some milk. We walked back. I gave the baby the milk and then he went to sleep. Well, when it was time for me to go home, when he needed to go pick up his wife, he saw that he knew the baby was sleeping. And so I said, oh, I need to go check on the baby before I leave. So I went in there and woke the baby up, made sure he'd cry. And I said, well, I have to take him with me. He's awake. He was not happy, but I was not going to go with him by myself. So this baby was actually a protection for me. Well, instead of going to where his wife worked, he went to the beach. And then he wanted me to get out and walk the beach with him. I didn't know what to do. I'd never experienced any. Didn't know. So finally, I got out with him, and we walked about 10 feet, and I said, oh, the baby is cold. So he says, all right. So we went and got back in the car. And instead of cranking it up like I thought he would, he put his arm across the seat and he started inching toward me. And I all of a sudden said, I think it's time to go get your wife. He says, oh, okay. Then we went back to pick his wife up, and then they took me home. Well, they wanted me to come again the next day. And I told my mom what happened. And she said, there's no way you're going to go back. And he had also told me, don't you dare tell your mom. Well, that's the first thing I did when I got back. I decided he's not going to tell me what I can't tell my mom. And anyway, when he came back to pick me up the next day, Mom says, my daughter is not going to go with you. You can leave the baby here. She'll take care of it here, but she's not going to go to your place again. He didn't like it, but he left the baby there, and that was when they came and picked the baby up that evening. That was the last we ever saw or heard from him. And I didn't care. Okay, some important lessons that I've learned. The first thing that my dad taught me, even though he was not a Christian, he never professed any Christianity, he taught me some important lessons. The first thing he taught me was to trust. Trust him completely. He would take me as a baby out in the ocean to ride the waves. I would sit on his belly and we would ride the waves. And I couldn't see land anymore. We were out so far. I trusted him completely that he would take me back home. And then the second thing he taught me was to obey instantly. And he was telling a man one time that Bonnie will do anything I tell her to. And this man did not believe him. So he said, okay, I'm going to prove it to you. He said, Bonnie, come on. He took me outside and he put me on top of the barn roof. He went below and he says, okay, Bonnie, jump. Without hesitation, I jumped and he caught me. I knew he was going to catch me, or he wouldn't have told me to jump. Anyway, the man was just really surprised. But what I want to say is, in learning to obey instantly, in learning to trust my dad, it has helped me to learn to trust God in the same way, and to obey him without asking why. That was one thing we were never allowed to do, is ask why. Ever. If we were told to do something, we did it. The last time my dad told me to do something and I did not want to do it, I didn't say, no, I don't want to do it. But I just sat there and I looked at him. And I looked at him and he says, drink it. It was whiskey. He said, drink it. I didn't say no, and I didn't say that I would, but I just sat there and looked at him. Finally, Lavina, my stepmother, said, John, she doesn't want to drink it. He says, oh, all right. Well, then you drink it. So she picked it up and they both drank. That was the last time my dad asked me or told me to do something that I really didn't want to do. And I'm glad that I didn't have to. I was glad that my stepmother stepped in and said she really doesn't want to. I was already a Mennonite. I was a member of the church. Why would I want to do that? Anyway, I think that's something that Dad didn't really get. I think I've talked long enough, don't you?
Well, I think she's not done with her story yet, but we'll give her a break. So we will pause for a short intermission. And I think what we'll do is just allow you to use the men's and the ladies' restroom. I think the guys in the sound room will be okay with that. I think they're the only men on the premises. So you can, use both restrooms. And then there will be a song that we'll start singing a song that you'll know to come back in and sit down. So you may be dismissed for an intermission.
Okay, you ladies may come back in for the second session here. Okay, to start the second session, let's turn to number 674 in the Songs of Faith and Praise, the Reddish book. Number 674. Let's sing the first two verses and then we'll give our time back to Bonnie after that. Okay, I have decided to follow Jesus. As we've heard, that's the good choice that Bonnie made. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. The world behind me, the cross before me. The world behind me, the cross before me. The world behind me, the cross before me. No turning back, no turning back.
Okay. My daughter reminded me I left out a whole bunch of stuff. So maybe I better start over a little bit. My parents met and got married when they were teenagers. My mom was 17, my dad was 19. And they got married, but things didn't go well. Anyway, my sister was born in Ohio. Then they moved to Washington, D.C. I was born there. Then they moved to Florida. My brother, who is not quite a year younger than I am, was born in, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's near Miami. And then they moved to Mariana, where another brother was born. Then they moved to Milton, and another brother was born there. Then they moved to Alabama, where another brother was born. And then my half-brother was born in Mississippi, and my half-sister was born in Georgia. So that might give you an idea how often and how much we moved around. My dad he had a lot of different occupations. One was, he was a professional boxer. He ran away from home when he was 15 to go box. He went to New York City and he was starting a boxing career until his dad found him. His dad found him through the newspaper that he was scheduled to have a fight at a certain place, so Grandpa went and got him. And he says, "No, but I have a fight." He says, "No, you don't. You're going home." So he brought him back home when he was 17. When I was, by the way, I was just 2 when I jumped off the barn roof. When I was 3, we lived on a farm that was a pecan grove. And for part of the rent, Dad was to oversee the harvest. So we would go out and we would help pick up pecans and put them in gunny sacks. Then they were stored in this big old house on the property. And there was another family living on the same property and helping with the harvest. they had 2 boys that were helping. And one day, the 18-year-old took me into the room where the pecans were kept and closed the door, and he did something to me that no girl should ever have to experience. And, you know, my concern is parents, know where your children are, know who they're with at all times. This had been leading up to this, and my sister sensed it, and she was trying to protect me. But what really, when it happened, I didn't know for years that it was me. I thought it was her. Because I remember the smell in the room, the pecans, the old house, the gunny sacks. Am I on? I remember the struggle, and then that's all. It was just blank. And for years, it was blank. And I couldn't remember what happened in that black time. And then, because I thought, the reason I thought it was my sister was because I was standing up and I was watching it happen to another little girl. I didn't know it was me. I believe that that was an out-of-the-body experience, because then I found out it was me. So, you know, it doesn't take long for something to change your life drastically. So that's why I encourage you mothers, pay attention to where your children are. Even at a family reunion, know where they are and what they're doing, who's with them. Because these things happen. They happen all the time, even with other family members. It affects a person their entire life. It has affected my marriage. For a long time, I was terrified. That's not fun. And it's not the way a marriage should be. Well, enough of that. Dad would have us children do things at a very young age. Like he often had me clean the barn, spray down the milking parlor, because he was a dairy farmer. And then he would leave. Well, one time he was leaving, and I was probably around 3, maybe 4. I was pretty young. Anyway, he said he's leaving, and he left me with the water hose. I was spraying down the parlor. And he told me he was leaving, and I thought he left. And then pretty soon he came back in and said, "There's a hobo walking down the tracks. If he comes toward the barn, take the dog out and tell him that you're going to turn the dog loose if he doesn't leave." Well, this dog was a big white German Shepherd. Her name was Sheba. And I was scared of Sheba because she had snapped at me and I thought she was going to take my head off. Well, that day I was more afraid of this hobo than I was of the dog. So when I saw the hobo was getting close to the barn, I took the dog on the chain and I went outside, and this dog is as big as me, and I could hardly keep a hold of her. And I told the hobo that he better get on down the tracks or I'm going to turn my dog loose on you. I said that with my fiercest 4-year-old voice. Well, he decided I was serious, and he said, okay, I'm going. And he left quickly. Another time, Dad, it was at a different farm, different state also, that Dad left me in the barn to wash it down. And he had started a fire, a trash fire. And he told me to keep an eye on the trash fire and don't let it get too close to the gas tank. And so I was watching it, and pretty soon I saw that it was getting close to the gas tank, that I knew that if it would get too close, the tank would explode, and then what? Anyway, so I ran and got a bucket, filled it with water, and by the time I had it out there, I had sloshed probably half of it out. And then I dribbled it along the edge of the fire. And I kept doing this until Dad finally came. But the fire had gotten within 2 feet of this tank by the time Dad got back. Boy, was I glad to see my dad. And I think it might have been no, it was a different barn than that. Dad needed to have the barn painted. So he bought a gallon of silver paint and some paintbrushes and told us little children to paint the barn. So we each got a paintbrush, dipped it in the paint, and we went to painting. Well, we ended up painting ourselves. And when Dad came back, he drove in and he saw 4 little silver children running around the barn. Well, this paint was not latex. It was oil-based. And so he said he's going to have to clean us up with turpentine. And so he started cleaning us up. Well, we yelled and we screamed because it burned so loud that the neighbor lady called the police. She thought we were getting killed. Another time, we lived close to a swamp where there were lots and lots of snakes all over. And we had to go through the swamp to get from the house to the barn. And we would have to jump over the snakes if they were across the path, or wait until the snake decides to move. Anyway, for years afterwards, I had nightmares about snakes. And I haven't had a nightmare like that in a few years now. But it lasted a long, long time. My conversion experience, I didn't tell you that. When I was 12, and still with the Mennonite family, William McGrath was there, and he was having revival meetings. The last evening that he was there, he was preaching about hell. And he made it so real that nobody wanted to go there. Anyway, that night, 30 young people responded, and I was one of them. That night changed my life, changed everything. Everything was brand new. I was so filled with joy and peace and love. I just wanted to run and shout and hug everybody. But then sadly, my foster mom when we got home, questioned me about it. She thought that I only responded because the others did. I didn't understand why was she asking me this when I know it was real. I think she knows. She finally realized that it really was real because everything was new, everything was changed. On the way back from Florida when I was 16, Dad told me, if you just have to leave, he will help me. I did say that before, but he says, but please, if you leave, go west. Don't go south. And by west, he meant my foster family. And so when I left when I was 17, I went back to the Gravers. I had also mentioned that Scott had come back, and then I was ready to leave. And he says, well, I'm not ready to leave. I just got back. I just got here. So I waited for a week or two until he was ready, until Lavina had done or said something to him that he was ready to just get out of there. So we piled our suitcases, everything, in the woods beside the house and covered it with branches. And then Dad took us to the school for, it was called Open Gym. And there was a ball game going on. And so he dropped us off at the ball game and he went home. Well, I knew somebody that worked in, it was a schoolmate. He was working in the grocery store. So we went down there, and I told him that I would like a ride to the bus station. And he didn't drive, but his dad, he says, well, my dad is coming pretty soon. You can ask him. So I asked him when he came, and he says, give me 3 reasons why you want to leave home. I said the first thing that popped in my head, I got a stepmother. He says, that's reason enough. I'll take you. So he took us and he stopped up on the road, and then Scott and this boy went down the hill and gathered our stuff, and we could hear my little brother and sister playing in the front yard. And it's a wonder they didn't get caught. But anyway, we went to the Columbus bus station, and there we spent a scary night. There were there were homeless people, there were tramps, there were people that just plain scary people. Anyway, so Scott and I decided we're going to have to pretend something we're not. We were going to pretend that I was his girlfriend. And so we would walk around holding hands. We didn't look enough alike for anybody to guess that we were brother and sister. So anyway, we spent the night just walking around, and then one time we had stopped to rest, and there was a guy in there that invited us to go to his place. And he told me that he'll share his bunk with me. And I thought, yeah, right, you're not doing any such thing. Anyway, we finally got on the bus around 2 o'clock in the morning, and we went to Tuscaloosa. And that's where Mom showed up. We had a 4-hour layover in Tuscaloosa before we would go on to Macon, Mississippi. And we had just put our things in a locker when Mom Graber walks in to take us home. That meant so much to me. But she brought a little bitty car. It was a foreign car, a little, have you ever heard of a Simca car? Anyway, it was really little. And she couldn't believe how much stuff we had. She thought we were coming with only the clothes on our backs. And here we had suitcases and boxes and a whole stereo set. And she said, I never dreamed you'd have that much stuff. Anyway, on the way, on the bus, Scott says to me, now, I don't want you to be no Mennonite. And I said, but Scott, that's exactly what I want. He said, why? Why do you want to be a Mennonite? So I told him that I believe that Mennonites truly live what they believe. They practice what they believe, what the Bible says. And I don't know of any other group of people that do it as closely as the Mennonites do. Then I told him that I would like for him to be baptized with me. And he says, I'll think about it. Well, as it ended up, there was I'm getting ahead of myself again. That was on a Saturday that we were picked up by Mom and took us home. The next day, I wore a cape dress and a covering to church. And that day, I asked the ministers if I could be baptized. And there was an instruction class that was already going, and for 3 months already. So they had another 3 months to go, and they said I could join them. So after just 3 months after we were back in Mississippi, we were baptized. And Scott got baptized too. But sadly, that it didn't, what would you say, didn't stick? Didn't last. It wasn't a lasting thing for him. Anyway, that winter, we went to Bible school, CBS, Calvary Bible School in Arkansas. And I was really enjoying it and putting myself into my studies and learning lots. One night, I was washing the dishes, and I wanted to get back to my dorm room to brush my teeth and get my Bible and get back to chapel. And I didn't have much time. And it was dark outside. So I was running. I had to run down a hill, across a bridge that was going over a creek kind of at an angle, and then around down a drive to what they called the clinic. And that was where my dorm was. Well, I couldn't see where I was going, but I thought I was in the middle of this bridge. And all of a sudden, I felt a pressure on this arm, and I fell on this side. When you're running and you fall flat. You don't fall on your shoulder. Well, when I put my hand down, right beside me was the edge of the bridge. One more step, I would have gone off that bridge. And I always felt like that was an angel that protected me, made me fall before I fell into the water. And I'm very thankful for that. God has protected me in so many ways. Am I running out of time? It's already 8. What time are we supposed to stop? I'm not nearly done. I mean, we can talk for another 3 hours if you want to stay. I've got enough stories to tell you. I went to Hillcrest right after that year of Bible school. We had gone to Hillcrest to give a program, and they announced that they needed a cook right away. And I thought to myself, I can cook. I can go. I had nothing to hold me back. So I told them that I would like to come and cook. So they gave me an application, and I sat right down, filled it out, and gave it back to them. I was accepted on the spot, which was unusual. I don't know how that happened, but the Lord was doing it for me. Anyway, I got to Hillcrest, and I kept hearing these words, VS unit. I had no idea what a VS unit was. I had never heard of it. Finally, I asked somebody, what is a VS unit? I keep hearing this. And she said, you don't know? I said, no. And she said, it's a volunteer service unit. Volunteer SVS. I said, oh, I didn't know that. And then when they gave me my first paycheck, they gave me money. I was doing it because I wanted to. I wanted to help somebody. And I was just shocked that they gave me money. Anyway, that was me. I didn't know much. I was very ignorant, maybe. I just simply had not heard of all these things. When I was with my parents, I had no church to go to, no social life at all. And then when I went to Graber's, every time there was a youth activity, I would ask Mom if I could go. And she said, of course you can go. You're part of the youth. This is a youth activity. You don't have to ask. I just couldn't go without asking. And I kept on asking. I think Mom got kind of tired of it. But she was gracious and still encouraged me to go. My brother, James. Okay, all 8 of us children eventually all ran away from home. Why? I was shocked to learn that Lavina told me this. She said, John and Becca left home just to get away from us. And I thought, what are you saying? And she said, John went to college and never came back. Becca joined the army to get away from them. She never went back either. None of us did. So I thought, well, why? What was wrong that even John and Becca ran away from home? And then I found out, I was in Texas this past May, helping I stayed with my stepmother so my sister Becca could have a break. And maybe I should explain how that happened. My dad passed away a year ago. Becca took her mother to Texas to live with her. And she needed a break to get away for a few days. And so I had volunteered to come down and stay with Lavina and take care of her. She has dementia. So I was down there, and then while I was down there, she told me, she said, after we all left home, the first 6 of us, she said she had to go and pick the blackberries, and she was not allowed to come home without the bucket full. And she said, but I was hungry, so I would eat blackberries, and then Mom would just send me right back out. That upset me. because she treated her own two children the same way she treated her stepchildren. Not saying it was right for her to treat us that way, but she would say she could never love her stepchildren as much as she loves her own children. And yet she treated them the same, so badly that they both wanted to leave home too. And I became pretty angry about that they were treated the same way. I thought they should have been treated better. And I was pretty disappointed that they weren't. I got a phone call one time from my cousin in Columbus, Ohio. His first question to me was, do you know how to defrost a freezer? And I said, yes. And he said, well, Aunt Baki and Ethel, this would be my great aunt that had the knit shop, their fridge freezer was frozen open. It was standing open about that far and then just covered with ice, and nobody could open it or close it. He said he had been there, this was like in August, I think. He said he had been there in March to visit them, and it was frozen like that. He didn't know how to do it, how to get it open. I thought everybody knows that. But anyway, I didn't tell him that. So I told him, yes, I know how to do it. So I went to Chicago, and I met my Aunt Jean, and I had not seen her since I was, I don't know, I think I had only seen her once in my life. So I didn't really know what she looked like, and she didn't know what I looked like. So she described herself to me, and I described myself to her, and then she told me where she was staying, what hotel, and she told me just go to the hotel, put my things in there, and then come to the apartment where Aunt Baki and Ethel lived. And she was there, she had come from California, and she was there to help empty the apartment, find room to walk, whatever. Anyway, so I got there, and then I had a wonderful taxi ride through Chicago, up and down those streets, horns blaring. And this driver, he was driving 60 on those streets and then slamming on the brakes and slamming on his horn to get people out of the way. Anyway, that was quite the ride. But it wasn't as fast as my ride when I went skydiving. We traveled at 120 miles an hour down. When you jump out of the airplane and you have a free fall, you go 120 miles an hour. Now that's fast. Anyway, I did that when I was 60. So that wasn't terribly long ago. When I got home, when I got down, I asked my husband, "Are you going to let me go again?" He said, "Sure. When you're 80. So I just tell him, I'm going to hold you to it. I've got 11 more years. I think he's hoping I'll give it up by then. Before we moved to Ohio. Okay, I'm really skipping around. Are you confused? Is this okay? Before we moved to Ohio, we lived in Mississippi for 6 years. Then we moved to, this is my husband and I. Then we moved to Indiana. We were here for 10 years. Then we moved to Ohio. because I wanted to help take care of my Aunt Ethel. I had helped move them from Chicago to Columbus, Ohio. So I wanted to help take care of them, so we moved to Ohio. Well, just before we moved, I was going over here. We lived on State Road 4, and I was traveling on County Road 35 to a little store. It was Miller's Country Store. Some of you would remember that, to get some flour. And I was coming up the hill where Joe Helmuth lived, and another car popped the hill as I was going up and got off the road, lost control. The car went over on its side and came sliding toward me. And I thought, this is it. I'm ready. Well, the car came, and when it was just within inches of my door, it suddenly turned and went down the other side and turned over in the other ditch. And I thought, what happened? I opened my van door and looked on the road, and there was a deep groove, about a half-inch deep, in the pavement where that car had made a sharp turn and went down the other way. I was just in amazement how God protected. Anyway, I heard a voice, and it said, I have something better for you in Ohio. And that really comforted me. That was why the Lord saved my life, because he had something else planned. And I think that was, when I married my husband, he was a very angry man. He had a deep-seated anger that he needed help. And I think Fresh Start. God had Fresh Start in mind for him, for the both of us. And I think that's the reason the Lord saved me and said, I have something better. I think it was Fresh Start. And I'm so thankful for what happened at Fresh Start, the new start that we got. It's precious to me how he changed and how I changed, and the healing we both got was a wonderful experience. I took a trip to Florida when my daughter Karen was 3 months old. I flew down to see my sister who lived down there. And here I was carrying my baby, my suitcases, my coats, everything. I was on my way home. And I thought my arms were going to break off. And I was praying to the Lord to help me, because I just felt like my arms were just going to break. And suddenly there was a girl beside me and asked if she can help me carry my suitcase. And I said, oh, yes, thank you so much. And she seemed to be a girl with no purse. She had a notebook that she was carrying, but nothing else. And I thought this was a little bit odd, but I accepted it, and we went on. And we went down to luggage claim. She set my suitcase down, and I turned to thank her, and she was gone. She was nowhere. And I asked the people that were standing there, did you see the girl that came and brought my suitcase? They didn't see anybody. So I'm sure it was an angel. Had to have been. At least I choose to believe that. Another time that, this trip is much too long to go into. So I will skip that and tell you about a song that God gave me. And the youth girls are going to come up and sing it for us. I was thinking about my dad, and I was praying about his salvation. And the words, I was driving down the road, and suddenly a song came to me along with the melody. And the words are this: my God is on the throne, and Jesus is beside him, interceding for us while we pray. All we need to do is pray and believe that he will hear and answer our plea. My God is on the throne, and he is in control. No matter what takes place, I know I'll see his face. So trust him with your heart. His promises are true. Obey his holy word, and he will help you through. Girls, if you would like to come up. I don't read music, and I had no idea how to get this on paper. And so I called Enos Stutzman in Ohio, and they suggested that I call back and record it on their answering machine, and then Enos would put it on paper for me. And so he did, and then later on he told me that he took the liberty to add 2 more verses. So the girls are going to sing it for us.
My God is on the throne, and Jesus is beside him, interceding for us while we pray. All we need to do is pray and believe that he will hear and answer our plea. My God is on the throne, and he is in control. No matter what takes place, I know I'll see his face. This world is filled with sorrow, trouble, and affliction, swirling all around us every day. God is on the throne, and he will relieve us when we come to him and pray. My God is on the throne, and he is in control. No matter what takes place, I know I'll see his face. Although the way before us on our pilgrim journey stretches out uncertain and unknown, we will persevere with confidence in knowing God is still upon his throne. My God is on the throne, and he is in control. No matter what takes place, I know I'll see his face. So trust him with your heart. His promises are true. Obey his holy word, and he will help you through.
That was beautiful, girls. Okay, I'll share one more thing, and then we'll just have to close it up. When we moved to Indiana from Mississippi, my daddy Graber found this poem that he said, "This applies to you." The name of it is Lesson, and it's by Grace E. Easley. They said you'll never make it, and they thought that they were right. But I kept on plodding onward because I hoped I might. And they shook their heads in wonder that I lacked the sense to quit. But I held my chin up higher, and I don't mind a bit. They said you'll never make it as the problems multiplied. But I had to make an effort and to know at least I tried. So I dug my heels in deeper, though sometimes my spirits lagged. And I shouldered what was lightest, and the rest I sort of dragged. And I found to my amazement at the ending of the day that what they said I couldn't, I had managed anyway. It only took 3 little words, Lord, help me. And I rid myself of doubt, and all they said I'd never do, I did. Thank you so much for coming.
To hear your story. I've read your book, but there's nothing like hearing it from you and just feeling the personalness of it. And it just, if you haven't read her book, you definitely need to get one. She has an amazing story. A couple things that really stuck out to me was how God gave you the personality to handle the life he had for you. Just that strength. You didn't give up. You did obey. You trusted. Just the personality that you needed to pull through those situations. And then how he can use that story to help us through. And a verse that kept coming to me is Psalm 91:11. For he shall give his angels charge over thee to keep thee in all thy ways. We all have that. It's a promise for all of us. And just to hear it again and again from you, it's just so affirming and reassuring for us. Okay, if anyone is interested in a recording of tonight, there is a QR code back on the table, and there are flash drives available. And if you still like CDs, like some of us might know how to use, there is a sign-up sheet back there, and it asks for your church name and address. I'm not sure what all it asks for, but we will try to get that to you through your church, I believe is how that is. The sound guys can help you out if you have questions about that. There are refreshments provided in the fellowship hall for a time of fellowship together. So we'd like to ask you all to stay and join in with that. So why don't we all stand and we'll pray a blessing on that. Father, we just come before you again. We thank you and praise you for this time together. God, thank you for Bonnie. Again, we just thank you for her and for her story. And God, I just pray that each one of us can take something home from this, an encouragement to just understand you better, and maybe to even know how to reach out to someone better that's around us that needs a friend to show them the way. Lord, I just thank you so much for your love to us and your care for us. Thank you for the food that you've provided. Lord, thank you for those that have prepared it for us, and I just pray that our time of fellowship can be honoring and glorifying to you as well, Lord. Give us safety as we travel home tonight. We just commit this evening to you. In the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen. You're dismissed. And just go ahead and head on over there. There's plenty of time to fellowship around the food.